So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Entrepreneurship 101. Sorry, no video this evening. You got me instead with a number of announcements. First one is, do we have the best practices slide in there? Here we are, which you can't read. The details of. It is part of the Mars Best Practices series. Going International, 10 Essential Facts. That's a little bit better. Now, this may sound a little premature if you're starting, but you got to start thinking about going international from day one. So you may find this extremely helpful. The speaker, Kamar Rizvi, is president and CEO of a company called Acumen. He helped launch the Mach 3 razor from Gillette throughout Latin America, Africa, Asia Pacific, Middle East, Russia, and Eastern Europe. This is a business about which I know precious little. But he knows a lot. And has a huge amount of experience in international marketing. I think you'll find, as with all of the best practice series, that this will be interesting. He'll talk about the myths, because Canadian companies don't have a good track record of selling internationally, and what are the barriers that stop us from doing so. So Thursday, January the 20th, it's a noontime, 12 until 1:30 upstairs, and I'm assuming there's a registration on the Mars website if you're interested in going. Okay, now, the Upstart Competition. This will be the last formal announcement and walkthrough of the rules. So just one more time, remind you that the Upstart Competition is a pitch competition, not a business plan, although you may well be working on a business plan. And in fact, I'm going to go back one. There we are. It is open only to folks who have attended at least 20 lectures by the time that the presentation takes place. There is a $10,000 prize, and as you can imagine, at this time of year, we have a lot of folks come out of the woodwork and say, oh, can I enter that competition? They've had nothing to do with the course, and so we're pretty firm. No, they can't. You have to have been, or at least a key part of the team has to have been part of the Entrepreneurship 101 course. Not everybody in a team, but I would say, you know, the lead and certainly the person doing the presenting has to be part of E101. It is a 10-minute presentation. Carrie will give me a hook, and if you go over 10 minutes, you will be yanked off the stage. You're supposed to use some of the things that you have learned as part of this course in helping you put together your pitch, basically. There's a $10K prize to the winner. There'll be a People's Choice Award this year and honorable mentions. So, again, who's eligible, have to be enrolled in the course, 20 lectures. It can be something that is an idea that you plan on rolling out, or it could be something that you have already started. It needs to fall in one of the 4 categories, and you can read them. They're the standard categories. All we're really saying is if you're starting a restaurant, it doesn't really fit, okay? It needs to be a high-tech business. If this is a high-tech or social purpose, technology-driven business, you'll fit in one of those categories. You must not have received any more than $100,000 in investment, and you can't have earned more than $100,000 in cumulative revenues, okay? And those we are pretty firm on. Okay, the process. By February the 4th, we want a 3-page executive summary. You will get assigned to an advisor through the advisory services team, and throughout February, we will meet all of those who submit the executive summary. The advisors then all meet, and we will cut it down to 10 who will go forward, who will be selected to go into the pitch competition. That will be done about the end of February. Throughout March and April, the 10 moving forward will work with advisors and advisor teams to as much or as little as you want. You are not forced to, but you got 2 months to get yourself ready. And then, the competition is Friday, May 20th. Typically, we start at about 2 o'clock, and it runs for about 3 hours to fit those presentations in. A 10-minute pitch, 5 minutes for the judges to ask questions. You are all welcome to attend and listen and observe, but everybody who comes in has to sign an NDA at the door, obviously because the companies will have to disclose some potentially confidential material about their business plans and we need to ensure that they are protected. We pick the winners that day, and there's a party. It's a reception, okay. It's a wine and cheese. We hold it upstairs, to which everybody is absolutely invited. And it's at that time that we normally hand out the certificates for those folks who actually have earned and want a certificate for the course. So that's about it. What do we use as criteria? And all of this is posted, or will be posted. You can see some of the themes of the lectures: the value proposition, competitive differentiation, a viable business model to make money or to have an impact if it's a social purpose venture. Do you understand? Can you demonstrate market awareness? And was the pitch a good one? And the last one, we always ask a judge, would you back this? It's always that critical test. That's about it. Send the summaries to that email address. I'm not going to take questions now because I don't want to eat further into the presentation time today. If you've got any questions about details, send an email there. We'll get right back to you with a response. Okay? Good. So, tonight's lecture, Market Intelligence and Analysis. I really am delighted to welcome a colleague of mine from Mars, and I think this is the first time presenting to this audience, Dr. Usha Srinivasan, who is the Director of Market Intelligence here at Mars, and we have a team that she heads up that does market intelligence. I didn't do it, sorry, thank you, for companies across the province, as one of the services that Mars provides. Usha, we stole Usha from Frost & Sullivan, which is one of the leading global market research companies, and she has published research papers there and consulted for companies of a variety of sizes. She's got a technical background, an industry background in water, environment, building technologies, and she's worked with clients like GE, Siemens, IBM, and Brita, water filter folks. And now she can add Mars to that list, and hundreds of small Ontario companies that she and her team are serving. She has a BSc in microbiology at Bristol and a PhD in environmental services, Abertay and Dundee. She has worked in the United Arab Emirates, in India. She's even worked with the Northern Research Institute and Department of Forestry in the Yukon, preparing a State of the Environment report for the Yukon territories. So snow and cold weather like this is a mere nothing to Usha, and she just brushes that off. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Usha for her presentation.
Thank you, Tony, for that generous introduction. I don't know who he's talking about. I'm just a lab rat masquerading in a business suit, like most of the people at Mars, I think. Thank you for taking the time to come out tonight. Like I said, I'm a microbiologist by training and have gained a lot of the business experience from just working at different places. So hopefully in the next 30 to 35 minutes, I can share some of my insights on that I've learned on market research, and hopefully it will be helpful to you. I always like to know who I'm speaking to, if you don't mind, by show of hands. I'd like to know in the audience by sector. Are there folks from the life sciences and healthcare side today? A few. How about information, communications, telecom? Again, same number, equally distributed. How about clean tech, my favorite area? Oh, just two. Thanks for that. So is this my, okay. So let's get started. So I'm going to be using the word market, industry, customer intelligence interchangeably, but I am including them all in one bucket. I actually used to work in the EPA in Cincinnati. For those of you who know, it's the headquarters of P&G. They are notorious for their tactics of intelligence gathering, which might be anywhere from dumpster diving to military-style intelligence. I'm not advocating any of those methods today. But just for a minute, think about it as just a common sense exercise, a logical way of gathering information before you design or develop a product, before you sell it. I'd like to start with a little story about a little boy, a 9-year-old boy, who was desperate for some money from his mom to get popcorn from school. The mom, of course, said, "You get enough snacks, you don't need any money." So he was devastated, of course, and he decided he was going to do something about it, earn his own money. He was too young to get money for chores. That is not going to happen. And he decided, okay, what am I good at? What can I do? I'm good at art, and I'm funny. My friends say so. And I like to say stories, tell stories. So he decided he was going to sell comics in his school. So he came up with this comic, The Adventures of Baby Daniel. Baby by night, a superhero by day, and showed it to his mom. So he, of course, his mom had lots of questions for him. Where are you going to sell this comic, she says. And he says, well, of course, in the schoolyard, of course. That's his place where he's going to sell it. The kids are bored out of their minds, standing in queue, getting into the school. So that's where I'm going to sell it. He decided that. Then she says, what are you going to sell it for? How are you going to sell this? You know, what are you going to charge them? And then he thinks hard about that and says, well, I don't have any change to give them, but they have 25 cents for that popcorn that I want. I'm just going to charge them that. It'll just be easier. And then she says, well, how do you know no one else is doing this? You know, do you know there might be other kids who might be thinking about this? He was quite confident. He said, no one else is as good as me. I'm sure that I'm funnier than anyone else, and but I'll make sure I have new ones every week so that I keep my customers happy, he said. And lastly, the mom said, is it really going to be worth your time? You know, is it going to affect your homework? Then he says, no, I'm going to spend only 3 hours a day, And as long as I get 25 cents every day for my popcorn, that's all that matters. I'm giving you this example of this story just to make a point that a 9-year-old boy could think about all these things in a logical manner. I'm not by any means saying that any of the information we gather for your market is as simple as that, but it is logical. But as we get older, as we get very close to the innovation that we are working on, technology we're working on, sometimes we can be in the forest and it can be hard to see what is obvious to someone else. So let's assume for a minute that, yes, you have identified a pain point in an industry. That's, of course, bread, not pain. Nobody's selling pain, thank goodness. And you have figured out, yes, it's worth to solve. You know, you're not spending hundreds and thousands of dollars to sell it for $1. So it's worth the effort that you're going to put into it. And hopefully, if it's not disruptive, at least it's not easy to substitute. And it is a market value for what you're working on. So what's next? I'm sure some of you have mentors or you've met with some advisors here at Mars. They all will tell you, well, the key to success is market strategy. But why is this so hard? I want to tell you about a simple example. Anybody recognize these things? These are water treatment filter systems. You have the Brita, you have it on the tap, you have it under the sink, and there's the fire hydrant kind of thing. It's actually a GE product that nobody ever saw. I'll tell you why. So something as simple as that. I'm using this example because we have people from different industry sectors so that it's a common ground. It's actually a very complex ecosystem. Did you know that this space, the residential water treatment market, is an $11 billion market globally? And there are over 800 players in this market. So imagine if you want to enter this space, the things that you have to consider. One simple thing, the water quality needs of the different regions of the world is not the same. You know, here we put in a carbon filter, or we might use a simple Brita filter. We're not so concerned. Most of us can drink water from the tap. Not the case in other places. So I should mention the different technologies that go into this simple product: carbon filter, UV disinfection, membrane technology, in various combinations and different design modes is what is being sold right now. How about the players in this space? There are some very well-known players that you probably recognize, like Brita and Culligan. But there are some sneaky other ones that you may not have thought about or think, how are they in this space? Anyone hear the name Amway before? I'm sure you've heard that before. Alticor Corporation is the head of Amway. And they actually have the largest market share of under-the-sink products in this space. You wouldn't know it because they are a multi-level marketer. Just to get the point that there are hidden competitors in a space that you may not have considered. And Woojin Kobe is a Korean company, again, a very leading company in this space. The distribution channels, again, are quite different in this space. You can buy it online, you can buy it through a distributor, there are water depots, even property developers like real estate developers buy QNO products and add as an add-on to your home. Whether you want it or not, it's an added feature. And then you would probably suffer about buying a filter for it because it doesn't exist, something like that. So there are some secret ways in which they're pushing their products. The price range is, again, very diverse. It can range from $50 to $800. And there are some strange selling business models here. Woojin Kobe, for example, has these water product shops where you can go and demo it, look at it, rent it. So I'm just trying to give you an idea of something so simple as a water treatment product has such a complex ecosystem, a complex way of looking at it. There's counterfeit products that you have to compete with. There are direct sales individuals involved. So it's very difficult to get into a space like this. A company like GE tried and failed, for example. They came up with the fire hydrant kind of thing that you see in the end is their xenon membrane product before GE bought the Xenon company and was sold through Maytag. But they were charging $10,000 for a product that wasn't needed in a market space like North America for a point of entry system, and they failed miserably. So just to give you a point that it can be hard. So what can market intelligence do for you in this space of difficult to operate segments? Information is your weapon. When you have the right kind of information on your market, customers, industry, you can at least make an attempt to have a successful launch of your product. It can help you to figure out who you're competing with, or substituting, or your position in the marketplace. You can decide on, is it worth for me to go after this? How big is this space? And of course, you can also figure out, should I be selling in North America or globally? And how should I be selling this? And which industry vertical should I be getting into? So hopefully in the next little while, I want to go through each of these. Before I do that, I want to also talk about where is this intelligence coming from. These are simple things that people think about, but just as to reiterate, the information source that you are looking at, the secondary research sources. Of course, you have the obvious websites and books and industry journals and newsletters, but also third-party analyst reports from market research vendors, company brochures that can be revealing of the information that is about your particular technology. And not to forget the primary research sources. Of course, entrepreneurs within yourselves talking to each other, you gain a lot of information from each other. The advisors that you speak with, the mentors that you have. There are a few other people that can add to that knowledge. One of them is information specialists. If you are from the university, and I'm assuming a lot of you might be from UFT, the library information specialists are a great resource for you to tap into to get information on, what sources to look at, etc. Maybe you're trying to do an online survey. That's typically a quantitative measure of what you want to gather, or look at focus groups, which is a smaller group of people that you look at, maybe trade shows that you attend on a regular basis. The analysts that write market research reports, as they are another great primary resource for you. And of course, all the social media stuff. And I heard about a new website just 2 days ago called Quora. Maybe I only heard about it new, but everybody else knows about it. But you could query this website on anything, and they gather experts into the space with providing you detailed analysis. It could be anything from cooking an egg to something more complex. But there are quite a lot of sites where you can tap into. So I just wanted to make sure these are basic things that people are aware of. Just want to reiterate that as I go through the different things, these are the places where you might be pulling information from. Okay, so let's get started. Who am I competing with? So the kind of questions that you probably are asking yourself is my technology really disruptive? If so, what is it replacing? Who am I competing with, and at the right price point? Maybe you're asking that question. Or you're asking if the competitor that you're looking at has a diversified portfolio compared to yours. So those are some of the questions you might be asking. And so now, what are the resources that you could be looking at? So in the market research space, obviously there's a lot of public domain resources that you could already look at, but of course there are paid resources as well that we provide here at Mars. First, patent related. So consider a patent or prior art searches in public databases like the USPTO, US Patent and Trademark Office, or the WIPO. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. Or paid databases make it easier to search through, such as Delphion or Total Patents are some of the products that we have used here at Mars. And really think about the value chain, where your product fits, where your technology fits before you do the patent searches. It is an art. Patent searching is an art. It's not easy. There are specialists who do this, and it would probably be a good idea to have them help you with that type of exercise. Also, you can compare product and technology capabilities by just simply looking at product brochures, because no company is going to be talking about things that they're not good at. So the product brochures give you a good idea of their strengths. Trade shows are great opportunities to do mystery shopping, so to speak, on being interested in a product, getting information about them if you're an entrepreneur trying to learn more about your competitor. And finally, a couple of different things that I think might be quite basic for some of the entrepreneurs here, but maybe new to those who are not in the business space. Doing a very in-depth SWOT analysis. A SWOT analysis is show of hands who's done a SWOT analysis before. Quite a lot of you. So you know exactly what that is. Looking at the strengths of your company, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The main one-pointer that I would give, often companies that work with us, if you do a general SWOT analysis for your company, that's a great starting point. But be honest and try to do it just for your technology, perhaps, or your employees, or just your financial status, or your distribution channel. Be very specific about what you're doing the SWOT analysis for, because it can be revealing, and you would get into the more granular detail of what are your difficulties and what the threats are to move forward. So this is a great way to understand your competitive position. The other thing, who's familiar with the Porter's 5 forces? A few hands. This is another way of getting your hands wet on, once I'm in the industry, what are the details that I need to be thinking about? What kind of potential entrants might be there in the industry, or suppliers that I need to depend on when I'm in the industry? There are substitutes, threats, and what are the buying power in this industry, for example. So these are information that is, I won't go into too much detail, but this information is in your entrepreneurship educational programming on the Mars website. A little bit more detail here on that. The next ominous question that most entrepreneurs ask us is, what is the size of my market? Of course, it's not the planet, something a little bit more smaller than that. So what is my potential market versus my addressable market? Meaning what you wish it to be versus what is realistic is something you need to think about. What is my market share among the competitors? This might be one of the questions you're asking. And in the appropriate space, maybe you are only competing with tier 3 type of companies, so you should be thinking about that. What is my share within Canada or Ontario versus at a global level? Of course, consult market research reports. Those are a good source for finding market size information. But the analysts that write the reports are human beings, and it's only as good as the analysts. So be careful about going by one particular vendor's information. Compare different information as much as you can. Also, don't be afraid to ask questions before. If you're intending to spend $3,000 or whatever to buy a report, don't be afraid to ask those questions to those vendors. Ask them about who they interviewed or what their methodology was. They're obligated to answer those questions and provide you that information so that you're comfortable with managing that information. Of course, they would be less hesitant to give you their proprietary forecasting models. That's understandable, but they should be able to give you basic things like, what definition they used. They included services in it, for example. Also, don't be afraid to do market sizing on your own. We've helped some of our companies that we work with that. A couple of different ways that you could do that. There's a typical bottom-up method that we talk about, where we look at the revenues of the different players in that particular space, and add it all together to get to a market size. Or use, of course, you would be in a tier 3 role in those kind of situations, or you can use a unit price or a volume of sale for a particular company, if it's a publicly traded, to get to the market share of that company and then determine market size. Of course, publicly traded companies are easier to get information from rather than privately traded, but there are resources, tax filings, press releases, and blogs, etc. They can give you a window into what their main product line is and what they tout as the main market shareholder in different information they provide on their websites. And ultimately, try to do regional market sizing versus global pictures. I think investors always get very nervous when they see large numbers thrown at them. It's always good to be logical and look at regional numbers for your product. Perhaps you can sell better in Asia versus North America. Be reasonable about the different spaces. And ultimately, of course, make realistic assumptions of what your projections are going to be year after year. The next question that you often get here at Mars, where am I going to sell? Should I be selling outside of North America? There are products that are really not meant to be sold here, but they are better suited for other countries. It is important to understand cultural and gender preferences in other parts of the market to do that. Of course, it would be great if we could all just travel to that location and get to know that place before we sell it, but I don't think investors of companies would look favorably on that if we take a vacation out to Korea for assessing that market. But also understanding of the regulations in that space, what is favorable and not, all of that is important. Partnerships. In some countries, you can't do business without a partner. In example, in India or in China, you can't really build a business without having a partnership. I remember once talking to someone with GE, a company like GE, the marketing director, the global marketing director of the water practice, he said, I'm sick of doing business in India, he says to me. They change the rules all the time, and I don't know how many more people I need to bribe. But this is exactly the words he used. I was offended a little, but this is the truth. It's hard to sell into certain markets without having legitimate partners. So just be aware of that, and you understand that you have those challenges. So what are some of the resources that you could use to understand your space? So obviously, there are customer-centric reports that are written that could help you from Frost & Sullivan. These are some of the vendor names that you may not be familiar with, but I've put them here, and the slides will be on the website so that you can tap into that. Forrester, in other public domain resources like industry associations, the trade ministries of the local regions. Those are all they can have quite a lot of useful information about the demographic and this selling point of those regions. The other thing is, of course, a lot of companies are using social media. I think you are all familiar with that. I thought it was quite interesting when I found that P&G used social media as a way to get feedback from young females on hygiene products. You can imagine young people do not want to talk on the phone. There's no way they can get any information from them. To survey them, this was the best way they could find, and they were quite pleased with the outcome. So there are different tactics people are using to do that. Please be, of course, we have to be careful about putting yourself out there and giving too much information about your product or what you're trying to do in a social media space and giving away your secret sauce. But that it can be quite effective. We ourselves have done, not in an official manner, but unofficially done some small focus groups for some clients here that we work with, and they have found it extremely helpful to understand the needs of the client before they develop the product. In one particular client that I can't name, but had used a small focus group to help him advise on what direction to take, and it really changed the way he looked at his product. as a result of it. So it can be a very valuable tool. Others have mentioned that simple things like connecting with the DFATE offices in different locations, just getting news clippings from that particular region if it's a very remote area has been helpful to them. And that's one of the things that they've provided as a feedback. In this particular case, since we're talking about different analysis methodologies, the PEST analysis that probably most of you are familiar with, political, environmental, social, and technical market forces, for a particular region, before you enter into a space, it would be important to understand each of these demographics before making a decision, whether it's a simple things like regulation, what is the disposable income in that region, etc. So these are another set of important points to consider before entering into a space. Another tricky question, how am I going to sell? Business and pricing models. I put Zipcar and iPhone there because everyone is familiar with these. Anybody familiar with the Zipcar? I'm assuming everybody's familiar with the Zipcar. Everyone knows that the iPhone has a very unique business model, but I was more intrigued when the connectivity between Zipcar and iPhone, there was as an app for finding your Zipcar. You can use your app to figure out where the Zipcar is available. You could, it would even sound the horn of the Zipcar in that location in the parking lot. So sky's the limit in terms of how these applications are working. So I think I've often heard our advisors even talk about it, that looking at other innovative business models that are working in other industries and trying to see if that applies to you. Perhaps it's something completely different, alien and different from where you're selling, but it could be valuable to you to think about. Pricing structure, the revenue models, etc. It's important to think about, who else, what is your positioning within that space? Maybe it's something to, you don't want to outsell. If you have a qualitatively higher product, make sure you are pricing it accurately. So in that point, we have, it's very helpful to have focus groups to determine price points, whether you're selling to a business or to a consumer, because that's a critical decision that you have to make as a company to move ahead. Also give consideration to the location of the where you're selling it. So you cannot obviously have the same price point in a U.S. market compared to an Asian market, for example. And maybe you also want to think about things like, this is another important thing entrepreneurs think about. Do I want to manufacture it myself and have a greater share in the company, but higher risk before and sell it directly, or do I license it out to another organization? Sometimes, there are pros and cons in both. It depends on the industry that you're in and the product that you're trying to sell. Last but not least, which industry am I going to sell into? Just a reference point, and the first line there I say, should I be selling into the DoD instead of the healthcare system? There could be very vast differences in between two markets that you are thinking about. As an example, since I used to cover the water treatment market and water analytical instruments market, and prior to 9/11, all the products that were in the water testing space very conveniently moved into the water security space. Companies changed their product offerings, the names, branding to meet the new needs. It was doing exactly the same thing, measuring the same thing. There was no difference whatsoever, but they decided to market it differently. So it does happen. You have to think about how you're going to sell into that space. Other things that you want to consider, maybe the regulations or the barriers to entry are lower in certain verticals, and that's your first entry point. And of course, selling into the government or the private sector, that can be challenging to sell into the government, but it's a long road. But once you're in, you have a set sales point there. Tracking the money would be my one thing that I would say in this segment. Understanding where the spending happens in different industries can help you to see which vertical you might want to get into. For example, the 9/11 incident that I already mentioned. Yes, there are security products that are coming into place more as a result of some of the incidences that have happened. Clean tech is another place that we see a lot of investment in. For example, even in Ontario, as a result of the Green Energy Act and the FIT program, there have been a lot more investments happening here. China has opened its gateway to clean tech with almost a $5 billion investment. This past, that is announced for the next 3 years. They're open to ideas from any part of the world. They want to really make a difference in the kind of environmental goals that they're setting. So understanding where the money is being spent can help you to also figure out the industries that you want to tap into and move on. Okay, this is a very big diagram with lots of writing. I understand that. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about market intelligence or industry intelligence or customer intelligence, it's not a one-time deal. You don't just do it once at the beginning of your company when you're starting your company. This is an ongoing exercise, ongoing intelligence that you gather based on where you are within your company. Maybe initially it's just to understand how big your market size is. But towards the end, maybe you want to sell your company and you're looking at other potential acquirers that you need to be aware of, or new threats. So just to make a point that you have to engage certain members in your company to continually provide or gather information on various aspects of your business so that you can be on top of the game. In this information age, it is very difficult. Things are moving rapidly. I would say maybe more so in the ICT space than in the water space, perhaps. We treat our water the same way in more or less in the past 20 years or so. Not much has changed, but the technologies are getting better and more refined. So important to think about it as an ongoing process rather than a one-time deal. Ultimately, whatever your product is, I love this shoe, by the way. It's just a very funny product. It's a CD player in a shoe. That somebody thought that would be a great idea. But we don't see that in here anymore. So regardless of whether you think the answer is a go or no go, you have understanding your market, your customer, industry dynamics is ultimately key for you to succeed. I also wanted to just finish off with a couple of other announcements. I want to cue up my slide for that one. Oh, by the way, I'm the fortunate, challenged mother of the 9-year-old entrepreneur who was selling comics. And he might be hustling you back there to sell some more of those, perhaps. The consumer digital health, yeah. So like Tony said, I head the department here at Mars on market intelligence, and I have a team here. We try to use the information that we have about the space and understanding the company strengths that we have in Ontario to write knowledge papers on different topics, and also invite key opinion leaders to participate in events. So this is one of the events that we have on the 26th on consumer digital health. If you're interested to attend, it's free. It's a breakfast event. There's more information on the website, but you can see it's on the 26th, 8:30 to 9:30. So it'd be very great if you all were interested to participate. Please do register. Okay, thank you very much.
Whoop, there you are. Quality of market information. How do you know in a focus group or a survey that people are giving you the right answer? I think of this because I heard a story about the Chevy Volts at the Detroit Auto Show.
Oh, is it working? I think it is working, yeah.
And they say Canadians talk a good game about buying clean cars, and so they say they want them, but they won't buy them. So how do you know that what people are telling you is true?
That's true. A lot of times, I think the surveys, like large surveys, they incentivize and also are very careful about who they're recruiting. Some organizations have a specific group of people they always have available based on their expertise that they recruit for surveys. So a customer survey might be a little bit difficult. I might just fill out whatever in my survey, a regular customer product, and even though I'm incentivized. But business to business, there are companies who recruit specialists in different industries who participate in, I think healthcare is a very good example. GLG Gershon Lehman Group has a healthcare practice, and they actually recruit physicians and nurses globally, and you can tap into expert opinions from those individuals, and you know that they are legitimate individuals who spend the time to do the survey. So yes, there are groups that would be able to do that for you. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just have one quick question. After you do, you have a good sense of your market intelligence, you have a good sense of what's happening in the market, and you're able to recognize where the major value exists in the market. Is there I wonder if you could talk a little bit about whether a next step would be to understand how your business should expand the value for you, specifically this expansion idea of just how does one business go about expanding the value towards their business? If you could talk a little bit about that.
So are you referring to, how to set the price point? I mean, in that particular space, or just expanding as in growing overseas? That.
Yeah, you talk about regional and also overseas, but say, for example, you identify a particular value in a region, a limited region, and you want to look at that pie that exists in that region, and you want to understand how to pull most of that pie towards you. Obviously, that's one step. Another option could be, how can you expand that pie so that there's more? Mm-hmm. So I just wonder if you could talk about that.
Creating value. So it depends. I mean, of course, it depends on what your product is. So there are a lot of things out there that are, nice to have. When it moves on to a must-have, and people are just not aware of it, then yes, there might be able to expand that pie. But if it's a nice to have, so it really boils down to the market need. I mean, expanding a pie or expanding the want or your selling point really depends on what the market needs are, right? So if you are perhaps like these Apple apps, I mean, they are a dime a dozen. They're just coming and going, like thousands, but they're making money by volume. It's a fad, it's coming and there is interest dropped. But if it's a critical product that people are just not aware that they actually need it, your education of that audience will obviously increase that pie. And also maybe you're substituting it with something else that exists that people are not satisfied with. So understanding the need will help you to expand.
Thank you.
I hope that's helpful, yeah.
I was looking for tips for small businesses that want to gain leverage. Say you've got a good idea, but you want to market it to somebody, and the people you want to market it to are large players. How do you access that market?
Okay, so you're selling from business to business sales.
Yeah,
is what
business to business, but small business with relatively low power to large business with large buying power.
Yeah, you have to be a great salesman, of course. So that was one of the things that, deciding between manufacturing and licensing, one of the things that said is, when you're licensing, you have to be a good salesman, with that one prototype. So I understand it's harder you really need to know what they're taking, what keeps them awake at night, that large player. If you understand what's keeping them at night, awake at night, and you are the solution solver, then you have their ear. It depends on what you're selling. I'm not sure what your product is.
I have no product.
Okay.
No, but so it's worth the time for small businesses to invest in understanding potential buyers' structures.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Hi. So microbiology and marketing are very different fields. Could you comment on the career path you took from microbiology into
my
director of
long
marketing?
path? I guess the short answer would be essentially my expertise was in environmental sector, and so understanding the technical aspects of it helped me to transition into the business side by writing about the companies that sell those products. So understanding the technology was important for me to transition into the business side to Frost & Sullivan, basically. And it's just experience learning, working in that. So you just start at the very bottom of the company and work your way up. So it's just from experience, yeah.
In terms of doing analysis, I think it's relatively easy to get data, but to actually get the intelligence is harder, or to get the insights. So when you're looking at a 5 forces or you've aggregated data, what are some of the questions that you ask to try and get some of the insights out of that that might give some form of competitive advantage or point to next steps?
Yeah, so yes, data can be overwhelming when you have too much of the information. And so that was one of the reasons I said that ask very specific questions. Like even for the SWOT, if you're very specific about, okay, I'm only going to look at the different factors that are important for just my technology aspects of things, not the whole company, then you can narrow down the information that you're putting in. Also the sources that you've gathered that information from, maybe you could say, okay, these are really from not legitimate sources. Maybe I could look at, and then your general strategy of what you're trying to achieve can also drive the importance of the information that you're looking at. And of course, it's always good to have a mentor or someone to review that information with you, talking it out, rather than trying to do it on your own. It's always helpful to have colleagues around you to hash it out, so to speak.
So are you saying that when you look at data, you expect something just to pop out of that data automatically and you're like, that's an insight?
No, so you'll be asking a question. Say, for example, you're trying to sell into a particular region. What are some of the critical things that you need to know for your business to sell into that region? So maybe it's an environmental product, and the first thing that you need to know about is regulation, right? So it's a question that leads to the answer. So if you're asking the right questions, it's following the logic of things, you can use the right information. So regulations is important. Then you think, okay, what type of regulations are there that for me to consider for selling my product? Then you're thinking about, are there local partnerships that I need to sell this? So that's the next question. So who are the companies that are there that I might need to know about? So it's like a pathway to questions and answers as you go along. So it's not something that immediately pops out, but it's a logical step each time.
All right, thank you.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. You brought up the example of the iPhone a few times, but let's say that the year is 2007 or whenever the iPhone came out, and let's say that I am an app developer for the iPhone. That kind of created its own market for apps. How would you go about collecting the data to make a business case for starting as an app developer in 2007 before the iPhone existed, or as the iPhone is emerging and so on and so forth? Like, how do you approach that?
So there's a lot of technologies, not just that app, iPhone app, but there are a lot of different technologies that are very disruptive, and you don't even know what the market is. But you have to think about, what am I substituting it with? But sometimes you're creating a new need almost. I mean, I don't have a need to find my zip car in that fashion. You're creating a need. So it's not always straightforward, and there are questions, there are products that's why I always come back to the point that, is there really a pain point that you're solving for a product to be in place? That's one of the key things. Oh, you don't develop something because it's cool. Although it happens a lot in the mobile space. But I'm just saying, in general, you have identified there's something wrong somewhere and somebody needs a solution, and therefore you're developing something. So the solution doesn't exist, or it's poor, so you're substituting it with something. So you can find out what the market needs are based on the substitute product at that point. But not, so that's the way I would think about it logically. I'm not from the ICT space, so a lot of the products I think about in the ICT space are very temporary, interesting, but it's not really solving a major issue in that space. So it's harder to say, what would be in 3 years from now.
So it's kind of guesswork.
It's futuristic.
Are paid analysts going to be any better at sort of reading the tea leaves of an emerging market?
You know what, though? One thing that I would say about paid analysts is they do look at what's happening in the MIT labs today, or other futuristic research going on an ongoing basis. They spend 24/7 just looking at that one particular space. Maybe it's cloud computing or something specific, but which you or I may not have time to do on a daily basis, but they do that day in and day out. So they might infer they may not be correct all the time, but they would know more about that space than you and I. So it is valuable to speak to them. They have some insights about what might happen, predictions that they might have. So I think it's worth tracking analysts in those companies like Gartner or IDC to see what they have to say. So it can be helpful.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay. I just was wondering, you were talking about a website before.
Yeah, I just heard this on CBC a couple of days ago, and I had to check it out. I first thought it was CORA, and then I realized it was Matt Galloway talking about it. QUORA. I've been, the response was, or the analysis was, that it's a little bit more sophisticated than the regular Twitter information, because they're recruiting knowledgeable people and their experts that they know to answer specific questions about different industries. It could be sky's the limit. So they're building a database of information. It's apparently new. Anyone else heard about this? See? I knew it wasn't new, but somebody else has heard about it. Would you like to comment more than what I know?
Shockingly, people are asking to follow me. I've only been on it for a couple of months. Do have some subject matter expertise in software, payments, mobile phones, and that type of thing.
It's the recruiting people.
I can't comment right now on the value of it.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of buzz of it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Would you like to go to the mic very quickly?
For what it's worth, it seems to be populated by a lot of intellectual people with subject matter expertise in certain areas. Usually, I'm in ICE area, so it's always information technology that they're. I've had a lot of people request to follow me in the last week I've only joined it maybe 2 months ago, and it seems to be tied a lot to this type of community too, in terms of entrepreneurs and subject matter experts in there. And I can't comment as to the value of it yet, but there's certainly a lot of buzz around it.
Okay, if there are no further questions, then I guess Usha will be here for a while, as usual, collect.